Welcome to More Than a Few Words, a marketing conversation for business owners. This is Lorraine Ball, and today my most frequent guest, Matt Nettleton, is joining me for a special conversation in my What Went Wrong series. Matt, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Lorraine. Happy to be here.
Yeah, you're pretty much a familiar face in that seat. You do hold the record, other than somebody like Allison Carter, who was my co-host.
Yes.
I think you've been on more than anyone else.
It's possible.
It is possible. I love chatting with you. And today, instead of asking for a sales lesson, I really want to dive into what went wrong, something that you thought was going to be a great idea that maybe wasn't, that my audience could kind of learn and maybe avoid. So,
so this is episode 1 of 43.
Yeah, we all have those in our lives, don't we?
Yes. So I'll tell you, there as when you sent the invitation and I kind of wrote down, there were 3 major things that I would say over the past 21 years as a sales trainer, I have actually screwed up pretty significantly. So the first one is something that I did right and then messed up. And that was, and I just had a conversation with the other 2 people involved in this story, but when I first got into sales training, I found an accountability group, 2 other guys that were also brand new to sales training. We all had similar goals. We all had similar backgrounds. And we decided that we were going to have accountability calls every Friday for 30 minutes. And would you each get 5 minutes to say, hey, this is what I did right. This is what I did wrong. And while we were doing that, the other 2 would fire back at us. Phenomenal system. Helped me tremendously for 2 years. And then we broke up the group. And I didn't find a coach or an external set of eyes to look at what I was doing for another 13 years.
Because you thought you knew it all, right?
You know what? It worked really well, so I stopped doing it.
Yes, that's always a great idea.
That's the theme of my life. So, but that would be the first thing that I did something. I was told to do something, right? The way it was explained to me is find a swim buddy. Find somebody else trying to get to the same direction that you are. They'll help you. They'll look at things differently. You know, Walker and Kevin and I all joke that we would get on these calls. We would talk about what we thought we did well. Everybody would make fun of us and we would realize where we screwed it up. We would talk about what we had done poorly and everybody would be like, well, wait a minute. That's actually a good thing. It's just you didn't get the outcome you wanted. So you can't result the process away. Just go back and work on being better at the process because the process was right. And we all left these calls thinking that we had taken more than we gave. Mm-hmm. And so that was fantastic. And then it broke up for a variety of reasons. And actually, all 3 of us kind of mentioned last week when we talked that, hey, none of us replaced it for like 10 to 15 years. And all of us we've rebuilt it with other people.
You know, I had a very similar experience. I had a great mastermind group, 3 other business owners. When you weren't yelling at me to raise my price, they were yelling at me to raise my price.
Yes.
They were yelling at me to get rid of bad employees. They really helped. And then one day we just stopped meeting. Yeah, that was a great idea.
Yeah, worked so well, I stopped doing it.
All right. So the first lesson is if something is really working for you, maybe you should keep doing it.
Yes. That is probably the simplest thing to remember ever.
Okay. What was your second mistake?
So as a person, I am fairly goal driven. I am objective and task driven. And it took me a long time to realize that setting 12-month goals and then managing daily tasks over a 52-week period was actually the death of me.
Oh.
Because you spend 51 weeks and 6 days thinking that you're failing. You get 1 day of victory and then you're back to failing.
Okay, so when you stopped doing that, or what? Okay, let me ask it differently. What made you come to the realization that this is not the best way to manage my life?
Well, so ironically, a book called The 12-Week Year made a tremendous amount of sense to me. In fact, since 2019, that's kind of been the way that I manage everything, where you set an annual goal, break it into 4 13-week periods, break those periods into weeks and those weeks into days. You can manage a day, you can manage a week, and then at the end of 12 weeks, you just reset for the next 12 weeks. And it's amazing because, like we all know, if you're on an airplane, you spend about 2% of the time pointed at the destination. If you're on a boat, it's like 8% of the time, but a majority of your time you're off track. But you're tacking back and forth towards the destination, knowing that things are gonna. And so what the 12-week year taught me was, yes, you can put your head down and you can grind away. And by God, I can put my head down and grind away. I've made the comment before, I have a weird birth defect. I was born without a work ethic. But the reality is I can put my head down and I can do the work. Mm-hmm. I just don't enjoy it. So what I realized is if I can set a 12-month destination and then know that for the next 13 weeks, here's the waypoint that I'm aiming for. Mm-hmm. I can also take that 13th week and reset the next waypoint, see what I've done. And while I typically underestimate what I can do in 12 weeks, I overestimate what I can do in a year. But it's surprising how I can adjust what I'm doing based on what I learned. The first time that I actually saw the value of this was when we got the world shut down by COVID, which happened like in week 11 of my plan. And it was like, there's no way I planned for a worldwide shutdown. But I had 2 weeks to sit back and go, okay, well, now I got a whole new waypoint. Where am I going? It was a detour I could adjust.
You know, as you're talking about that, I was thinking about when I was in grad school and I lived 13 weeks at a time because I lived one semester. There was so much going on in my life. I just had to get through this 13 weeks.
Yes.
And then I could reset and worry about the next 13 weeks.
Yes.
And I think mentally your head wraps around that really well.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I have proven for years that you can set an annual goal. You can put your head down. You can do the work on a daily basis, every day, same thing, just grind it out. Mm-hmm. But it is so much nicer to be able to say, well, I'm going to do this for 13 weeks. And then I can come back. Now, 13 weeks is basically 91 days. I do have, like right now, I'm in the middle of a 100-day challenge. Mm-hmm. But I can do 100 days. Like this is not 100 days and then another 100 days. It's somebody challenged me to do 100 kettlebell swings a day for 100 days in a row. That turns into 10,000 kettlebell swings, which you can't do 10,000 all at once, but 10,000 over 100 days, I can manage that. So.
Well, and I also love that you give yourself permission to celebrate, because if you set a milestone for 13 weeks,
yes,
and you get to that waypoint, that milestone, you can say, I did that and that was good. And now where do I want to go? And sometimes I think, you look at it at 13 weeks and you're like, you know what? That annual goal isn't really like COVID. Yes. That's not where I'm going this year.
That was a great plan. That's not what's happening.
No. And so giving yourself permission to say, you know what, we're changing direction here. And this is what I'm going to do for the next 13 weeks and then see what happens with the rest of the world.
Right. And so one of the questions I ask my clients on a regular basis is, what do you know now that you didn't know 13 weeks ago as you're rebuilding your plan?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Everybody has something.
Cool. All right. Because you said that there were 3, so I'm going to give you the shot to tell me one more great story about lessons Matt Nettleton has learned.
Oh, this one's embarrassing. So the first time I was on your podcast was 2010.
Yes. Yes, it was.
And the first episode of my podcast was 2023.
And along the way, I might have suggested to you as you kept coming back that you'd be good at this.
Yeah. So my third mistake is I had obvious things that I could do to enhance my brand, and I didn't do them. Now, in 2003, a guy named John DeGregory sat me down in a nickel plate bar up in Fishers and bought me a beer and said, hey, I want to take the website that you're selling from and I want to eliminate all the text and make it video. I'm like, John, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And he goes, no, I think it'll work. Have another beer. and so he won the argument and we did it and it worked. And since 2003, I've done a lot of video marketing, but that was just one piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there are other things, podcasting in particular, that have been a great addition that it only took me 13 years to take advantage of. So the next thing is when I got good advice from people
Mm-hmm.
who knew what they were talking about, I actually failed to listen. By the way, I may have gotten some similar advice from my wife occasionally over the past 25 years, 30 years that we've been together, and also failed to listen. But I'm only talking professionally about developing my brand at this point. So,
yeah, I think that's really hard sometimes when someone tells you something and you're like, yeah, no. And having that courage to say, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to try this. This might be a thing.
yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you finally did come around. And I'm going to suggest that if you guys are listening and you want more of Matt, and you should want more of Matt, that you should check out the Default Profitable podcast. There'll be a link in the show notes. Matt, thanks for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me on to talk about my public mistakes.
Well, but people will learn from them, and you are doing the world a service.
I'd like to think so.
If you've enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to find other resources for your business, be sure to check out morethanafewwords.com. There you'll find hundreds of conversations in my archive, including quite a few with Matt Nettleton. There are workbooks, white papers, videos, and so much more. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.